Caltron 6 in 1 was released at some point in 1992 for the NES. It's an unlicensed multicart that contains 6 games of varying genres. The game was developed by a Taiwan-based company called Caltron. While the origin of the Caltron 6 in 1 is somewhat unknown today, it's believed that Caltron is the same company as NTDEC, or Nintendo Electronic Company, who was known for producing pirated Famicom cartridges between 1989 and 1991. After 1991, the NTDEC began to produce games under both NTDEC name as well as the Megasoft name. It's believed that Megasoft and NTDEC are the same company because they use the same serial numbers on the back of their games. Many of these games developed by NTDEC and Megasoft would be included in the Caltron 6 in 1 pack. The multicart, as the name implies, contains 6 games: Kozmos Cop, Magic Carpet 1001, Balloon Monster, Adam and Eve, Porter, and Boogeyman. The first game up is Kozmos Cop. The game is a 3D shoot-'em-up similar to Space Harrier. This genre was attempted for a few games on the NES, like 3D World Runner, but Kozmos Cop is an awful example. The sprite scaling makes it basically impossible to figure out where things are on the screen in relation to where you are. Most of the time I spent with this game, I spent dying repeatedly, and whenever you want to continue the game, it plays the intro every time. Now, this wouldn't be a problem, but the intro takes about 25 seconds to scroll all the text and is completely unskippable. This sucks, and the fact that it's super easy to die in less than 2 minutes means you'll be sitting through this screen a lot. Kozmos Cop, in the end, is a really just terrible clone of Space Harrier that the Nintendo hardware really couldn't handle. It results in a pretty boring game that can easily be skipped. The second game in 6 in 1 is Magic Carpet 1001. This game is a horizontal shmup whose main trait is that it moves really slow. I actually kind of like how slow and methodical this game is because it actually gives people who aren't great at the genre a kind of fighting chance at it. Most of the enemies' attack patterns are pretty predictable, but they do become more erratic on later levels. The boss fights are all basically the same, and on the higher levels the only thing that seems to change is the number of projectiles they shoot out. There's 4 different types of power-ups in this game. P power-ups, which increase the speed in which you shoot, as well as the number of projectiles you shoot. S power-ups, which speed up your character. Hearts, which allow you to take 1 hit before dying, and there's also extra lives. It's super important to keep your attack level as high as possible because without them, boss fights are extremely difficult. Graphically and musically, Magic Carpet 1001 falls super flat. The graphics look like it came out 5 years before it did, and the music is the same Snake Charmer music that drones the entire time, except for the boss fights, which the music becomes a simple 3-note square wave. So both the graphics and music are pretty boring with this game, but at least it's a lot more playable than Kozmos Cop. Up next is Balloon Monster. Balloon Monster is a clone of Buster Bros, where the goal of the game is to pop a bubble or balloon that breaks into smaller pieces as you pop it. Once all the pieces are gone, you beat the level. The biggest difference between Balloon Monster and Buster Bros is that the balls in Balloon Monster quickly lose their bounciness and will quickly become unavoidable death traps on the ground if they aren't destroyed quickly enough. The unavoidable balloons becomes tedious when trying to get through the game and eventually does really drag this game down. The primary gameplay has you shooting a gun or darts or something upward at balloons to pop them. You don't have the ability to attack left or right, and there are no power-ups. Balloon Monster, while somewhat hard to get down at first, is actually pretty fun, although the difficulty does ramp up drastically as you progress through the levels. The difficulty in the later levels all comes from adding platforms above you that changes how the balloons will react and whether or not you can shoot them. Balloon Monster's graphics and audio are also pretty poor. The music sounds like a few random arpeggiated notes, and the graphics look very early for the NES or Famicom. Overall, Balloon Monster is a vastly inferior knockoff of Buster Bros, and if you're looking for this style of gameplay, I'd just stick to that instead. The fourth game on Caltron 6 in 1 is Adam and Eve, which is a balloon fight clone. Despite the name of the game, it has nothing to do with the story of Adam and Eve. Well, maybe except for the enemies. The enemies are snakes with balloons on their heads, and you have to fly on top of them to pop them, and then also hit the snake a second time to actually defeat it. If you're too long defeating the snakes on any level, a bird will appear and start dropping bouncing turds on you. Each level has different layouts of where the platforms are, although the game's difficulty is kind of all over the place, as the first level's harder than many of the later levels. The game's actually pretty challenging and fun, even if it is an inferior clone to Balloon Fight. Adam and Eve's graphics look like it's straight out of 1985, as everything looks extremely simple. The audio in this game so far is the best on Caltron 6 in 1, with 2 songs that actually sound like songs. The first song has kind of a happy-go-lucky video game music vibe to it, and the second one is more of a rock and roll blues vibe. These 2 songs alternate on each level. Overall, Adam and Eve is a much stronger title than any of the ones before it in Caltron 6 in 1, and is actually pretty fun, albeit a poor man's version of Balloon Fight. The next game on 6 in 1 is Porter. Porter is a puzzle game that's similar to Boxel on the Game Boy, where you have to move boxes around to specific spots on the board. The first level starts out easy and shows you how to play. You move the boxes to stars and you pass the level. The second level comes at you with an extremely hard puzzle to solve that'll quickly having you lose any hope you had for this game. I spent way too much time with level 2 only to never figure out this stupid thing out. The music in Porter is okay, but this game is a nightmare and no one should ever waste their time with it. The final game on the Caltron 61 collection is Boogeyman. Boogeyman is a hack of a game called Brush Roller, which is a clone of a game called Make Tracks, which is kind of a ripoff of Pac-Man. The goal of the game is to move the beetle you control around a maze and walk over every part of the maze. This isn't as easy as it sounds because you're chased by two AI lizard-looking things that will kill you if they touch you. The biggest problem with these enemies is that the AI is way too smart. They're like Terminators for beetles, and they'll always take the path of least resistance to kill you. This means the corner of the maze are exceptionally deadly. You're able to fight back by using two parts of the maze to your advantage. There's some brush-looking things that if you run over the lizards, you'll be able to take them out for a few seconds. The AI, however, is still smart even about these, and often it's hard to get them into a situation where you can actually roll over them. On the brush that goes horizontally near the bottom of the screen, there's tunnels that lead from both sides of the map on either side of the brush, so it's really easy to just trap yourself on the brush and get yourself killed. The lizards aren't your only enemies in this game. There's also enemies that will spawn on each level and lay down black dots to prevent you from finishing each level unless you go over them. The enemy that lays down the black dots is able to be killed by running into them, so it's in your best interest to run into them as fast as you possibly can. As with all the other games in this package, the graphics look dated for a 1992 release, but the music in this one is actually at least fairly okay. It does get a little bit repetitive, but it's better than the smattering of random notes found on some of the other titles. Despite how convoluted the gameplay sounds, it's actually pretty fast-paced and fun, although the AI is way too smart and you'll see a lot of cheap deaths because of it. So, overall, how do these games rank when compared to each other? Well... without a doubt, the worst game in this package, falling in at number 6, would have to be Porter. The difficulty on this puzzle game ramps up too quickly, and the game isn't fun for really any amount of time. I can't even find video of anyone getting past the third stage on the internet, this game is so hard. Number 5 goes to Kozmos Cop. While the game is interesting and attempting to squeeze as much power out of the NES as possible, the game is way too difficult, mainly because it's hard to grasp where you are and where things are on the screen. The sprite scrolling is awful, which makes the game hardly playable. Number 4 goes to Balloon Monster. The game in concept is pretty fun, but the unavoidable death balloons are a nightmare, making this game go from challenging to just unfair. Number 3 goes to Magic Carpet 1001. This horizontal shmup, while slow-paced, is actually pretty fun. Without any weapon upgrades, the gameplay does feel slow, but it does allow you to really think about when and how and where you should shoot. Number 2 goes to Adam and Eve. This balloon fight clone, while feeling really clunky and heavy in its movement, is actually really challenging in a good way. I really enjoyed it. Had it been released 7 years earlier, it may have been fondly remembered, like Balloon Fight. Number 1 goes to Boogeyman. Even though this game is a hack of a clone of a ripoff of a game, the game is actually pretty fun. There's a lot going on in this game and it all just kinda works. I wouldn't say it's the best 80s maze game, but when comparing it to the rest of the titles on Caltron 6-in-1, it's probably the strongest entry. Following the demise of Caltron Industries, a Texas-based company named Myriad Games ended up buying all the leftover inventory of Caltron 6-in-1s and repackaged them as the Myriad 6-in-1. The only change to the original product was replacing the original label with their own, which was done poorly. The Myriad labels weren't even large enough to completely cover the original Caltron sticker, so some of that sticker is always left showing. Both versions of 6-in-1 are among the rarest unlicensed games for the NES. The Myriad version in particular is extremely rare and expensive, being valued at over $1,100 according to PriceCharting.com. Caltron 6-in-1 being worth far less at $150 according to PriceCharting.com, although in the wild I've seen Caltrons go for 3 times that, with asking prices well over $400. Overall, the origin of Caltron 6-in-1 might be more interesting than the game itself. The game is packed with subpar clones of games that are much better than it, so there really is no reason to own this game unless you're an extremely hardcore NES collector, and even then I wouldn't even really recommend it for the games inside. Every game that this game is cloning can be bought for less than a third of the price, so I'd go that route if you're not made of money.